So let's talk about a train that I use quite a lot, Hamburg, Germany's S5 route. This is part of the Hamburg S-Bahn system, which combines with the U-Bahn and the AKN railway to form what a lot of documents from the HVV, that's the local transit authority here, they often refer to as the USA Bahn. Take that, Americans, I guess. The S5 is technically the newest route in the S-Bahn system, only starting operation in its current form in December 2023, which at the making of this video is last year. It runs concurrent with the S3 line for most of its route, extending from the Elbgaststrasse yards in Hamburg proper, all the way south of the Elbe River, out of the state of Hamburg into Niedersachsen, and then terminating at either Buxtehude or Stade, except when it doesn't. It was part of an effort by the HVV to streamline the S-Bahn system with a new numbering system, except that didn't totally work. And trains run every 20 minutes along the entire 40-kilometer southern track to Stade, and every 10 minutes towards the town of Buxtehude. Except when it doesn't do that either. Oftentimes it seems to just be a different colored S3. Or worse. The S5, at least from a Hamburg perspective, in my opinion, is a mess, and as someone who has used it at least once a week since it was introduced, I have some serious thoughts on it. I'm Jamie, welcome to the first video from Tales from the S-Bahn, which also, by the way, is part of Classy Wales One Line Wonders Challenge. Today I'm going to go over why the people living in the south of Hamburg and beyond deserve better than the S5, and the best way I know how. Oh, I need another sip of wine. So for full context here, I live in Stade. That's at the very far end of the S5 line, right here. Honestly, the fact that Stade is in the Hamburg S-Bahn network, despite being so far away from the city center itself, was a big reason we opted to move here about 2 years back. I want to say Stade is a small, humble town with not much going on, but no actually. Stade is actually considered one of the best day trips you can take from Hamburg. With our historic old town, canals, and easy access to plentiful biking paths and hiking trails, I can attest that it's a great place to live. I mean, I've been here for a few years now, and I don't plan on leaving anytime soon. Besides, the rent's cheap. Stade is also an area that's growing, with the last census showing over 40,000 people around this area. That's not massive by any means, sure, but certainly big enough to support regular train travel. How even some nearby towns of barely 1,000 people get hourly rail service. There's 3 major train lines that connect Stade to the outside world. First off is the Moor Express, which is a historic tourist train that runs along mostly disused tracks to Bremen on the weekends during the spring and summer. The next 2 lines are the S5 and RE5, which have to be mentioned together. I think there's a lot of totally great potential of these 2 lines. But before we get into that, let's talk about the Hamburg S-Bahn system itself. S-Bahn systems are often seen as suburban rail lines with metro elements in the city center, but in Hamburg, much like in Munich or Berlin, the S-Bahn lines operate more like proper metro lines in the city proper. We're talking frequencies of 10 minutes or better, extensive connectivity with the U-Bahn and regional rail lines, and high-capacity fully walk-through rail cars that come in articulated sets of 3. The extension from Neugraben, the southernmost proper Hamburg station, first came in 2007 when the S3 line was extended south. Up until that point, the RE trains were the main point of contact of the so-called Altusland, with people having to switch from the S-Bahn to the RE at either Harburg or Neugraben. After years of campaigning by residents of the district of Stade for better connections to the surrounding areas, including at one point in the 90s a test being done by a group of students for putting in a Karlsruhe-style Stadtbahn tram train system, this seemed like a great way to strengthen the ties between Stade, Buxtehude, the surrounding towns, and Hamburg. But things are never so simple, especially here in Germany. Instead of a more metro-esque operation like in Hamburg proper, due to the more scattered populations out here, The idea of the Stade extension was to run the S-Bahn trains more like express Regiobahn trains. As such, the RE5, which starts at Hamburg Station and stops at Buxtehude, Hornenberg, and Stade before heading on its route to Cuxhaven, acts like an express version of the S5 up until it hits Stade, an express train with free Wi-Fi in a first class section at that. You can often really notice this whenever the S5 is having cancellations for whatever reason. On those days, the RE will add in additional stops at S5 stations, such as Neugraben, Neukloster, and Gothenburg. Fun fact, by the way, this is also the only time the former regional platforms at Neugraben get used. There's something so depressing about abandoned station platforms to me. Just reminders of prior times, perhaps with less austerity. Even Bahnhof Stade has one of these. What an eyesore! Put that track back into use, damn it! The trains that operate on what used to be the S3 route and is now the S5 are very unique on the Hamburg S-Bahn system. Trains here operate within the city of Hamburg using a unique third rail side contact power setup. However, as the HVB decided they weren't going to do any major new track construction past Neugraben, what they instead went for here were special dual-mode trains. These trains can use the standard 1200-volt DC power the rest of the system uses inside of Hamburg, but once they cross south of Neugraben, pantographs rise and power switches to 15 kilovolt overhead power. Often crossing north from the Fischbeck station to Neugraben, you can even hear the telltale thunk of the pantograph blowing, which always makes at least a few people jump. It's kind of amusing. So on a technical level, I find the S5 fascinating. This is a 50-and-some kilometer route that uses metro-esque heavy capacity trains that can get you into central Hamburg in only around an hour and a half on a good day. What's not to love? Well, Das easy peasy Netz. Really, HVB? Ha, if you will. Here's some context about why I miffed about this announcement from last December, and the S5 itself. From 2007 up until December 2023, the Hamburg S-Bahn had 6 lines, though technically it was 3 lines with truncated peak variants. These were numbered S1, 2, 3, 11, 21, and 31. All 6 routes would meet at Hamburg Hauptbahnhof, the central station in the middle of the city, diverge among one of 2 routes across town, and then would meet up at Bahnhof Altona. Well, with the exception of the S21, which made a point of bypassing Altona altogether with a nearby flyover. Altona, by the way, is often seen as kind of a second city center for Hamburg. Lots of pedestrianized streets and IKEA, and a station that's often a pain for long-distance trains as it's a terminus. With the exception of S-Bahn trains that go through the city tunnel, all trains that enter Altona, regional or long distance, have to change direction to get out of the station. Speaking of the city tunnel, that route dives underground between Hauptbahnhof and Altona, and its major areas such as Jungfernstieg, which has a lot of major city attractions such as the Binnenalster Lake. Then there's Landensbrücken, home of the city's historic port, and even a station at the Reeperbahn, which is famous for much more, adult reasons. This isn't to be confused with the Southern Tunnel, also called the Harburg Tunnel, which both the S3 and the S5 go through to, well, Harburg, which is also a major long-distance train station. The other route through downtown Hamburg is the mostly elevated connecting railway. This includes stops at Domtor Station, a through station that opens up onto Plantenblumen Park, and Sternschanze, which is a major entrance to the city's main convention center. The single-digit lines all went through the city tunnel. The double-digit lines all went through the connecting railway. I thought it was actually a really intuitive way to remember the network and which trains went where. I don't know what I'm doing. A special note here in the S5 story are the S31 and the S3. The S3 went from Pinneberg via the city tunnel to either Neugraben, Buxtehude, or Stade. Sure, the frequencies weren't as good as they are now, during peak times anyways, but being able to go from my home all the way non-stop to Altona was awesome. The S31, on the other hand, mostly followed the S3 as a peak variant, but also went a few different places. It went from Elbgaststrasse, which unlike Pinneberg is within the city of Hamburg, via the connecting railway to either Harburg Rathaus or Neugraben, or for some reason Berliner Tor. What the hell, that's not even part of the normal S3 route. But then last year, the HVB and Deutsche Bahn went ahead and simplified the S-Bahn network. So they said. The S1 and S2 routes would stay mostly the same, with the S1 being more frequent, and the S2 now going via the connecting railway, but still ending at Altena. The S3, however, would no longer go to Stade. Due to the growing amount of demand south of the Elbe and the lack of transport connections in areas like Harburg, S3 trains had begun to run with 9-car sets into the Hamburg city center, the maximum length accommodated by city S-Bahn platforms. The issue, however, were the platforms at stations past Neugraben, which were designed to accommodate shorter, though often bi-level, regional trains. This had led to frequent delays at Neugraben, where 2-set 6-car S3 trains would often have to sit for several minutes upon arriving from Fischbeck, while another set was coupled to the back. And you know, the inverse when heading the other way. The new S3 would always run with 9 cars, supposedly, but only to Neugraben. The S5, however, was built as a new merger of the S3, S31, and S21 to one new mega route. One that would give service to the people of Buxtehude and Stade on a more clockwork basis. Except it mostly doesn't. It's actually been plagued with issues. Construction problems, accidents, technical problems. In a way, the S5 is perhaps a microcosm of the Deutsche Bahn's problems on the whole. But that's a dive for another time. Sometimes the S5's route is just different than it should be. Sometimes the train is just running the hop-on-hop. Sometimes we can't even cross north into Hamburg because, wow, who knew that only having one rail bridge across the Elbe might turn into a major problem? And often lately, it seems like trains are getting cancelled left and right, even when I'm already on board. It's so much of a problem that the HVV even recently released a statement on it, and that's without even getting into how this service is routed. In my opinion, as much as I love Plantenblumen, there's a reason it was ranked the best park in Germany, I think this new routing is an absolute downgrade, at least from a commuter perspective. First off, the S5 does not go through the city tunnel, but rather through the connecting railway. So now if you want to access the hub of the city's nightlife, or any of the ferries, or pretty much most of Hamburg city center really, then you've got to change at some point. But perhaps even more egregious, it also uses the old S21's Altena bypass, meaning that it, again usually, doesn't go to Altena anymore. Yes, I know that once you're in the city of Hamburg itself, connections to other lines are mostly easy and shouldn't take more than 10 minutes. I know that a lot of places wish they had lines this frequent, but at the same time, downgrading from a direct route to a major area to one that requires a connection, even a simple one, is still a downgrade. And even more crucially, by bypassing Altena, the S5 now only has one singular connection to the S1 that heads to the airport. Since this is Hamburg and pretty much every line goes through there, that connection, of course, is at Hamburg Hop-on-Hop. Hamburg Hop-on-Hop has a very unique problem. As a foamer and a girl who chooses not to own a car, I love the amount of service the station gets. But when I'm commuting, my god, it feels like Hop-on-Hop perhaps gets too much service. This is literally Europe's second most used train station, and the busiest in Germany, accommodating over 600,000 passengers a day. And my god, can you feel it at times? That's nearly double the amount of people as in Berlin's Central Station, and a station that takes up less than half the space. I sometimes actively fear for my safety here, as often multiple trains are having to share platforms, leading to huge crowd rushes of people, which on more than one occasion has led to people being pushed onto the tracks. The Hop-on-Hop's problems are perhaps worth a video on their own, honestly, but what's important here is that it's not a great place to have to connect through. Now, I'm not saying that requiring people going to the airport from the Stade and Buxtehude regions to change that Hop-on-Hop to the S1 is the only cause of the crowding problem. Changing this alone is not going to fix the entire crowding problem, obviously, but having another option for changing to the S1, even if it takes just a few extra minutes, is very valuable here, just from a quality of life point of view. And speaking of quality of life, Dear HVV, if anyone from there is watching right now, if you could change any one thing about the S5, it's the off-peak schedule past Neugraben. I know I've kvetched about the routing, and the bridge situation, and how I miss the intuitiveness of the old route numbering system. But something that was a problem with the old S3, and that is still a problem with the new S5, is the off-peak and weekend scheduling. Before I go on, I want to acknowledge something again, and that's that I know I'm fortunate to live in Germany. Look, I used to live in Canada. Back in Victoria, BC, our only commuter rail route got privatized, neglected for years, and then shut down. However, the name Hamburg S-Bahn, at least to me, carries a bit of an expectation of consistent, rapid service. So, going down to only hourly service on the S5 in the evenings or on weekends and on holidays really hurts the system's usability from Stade. And I know better is possible because again, we get that nice rush hour service of trains every 20 minutes here and every 15-ish from Buxtehude. I feel like the idea here with the off-peak hourly service is that the RE5 will fill in some of the gaps south of the Elbe, perhaps even the S5 and RE5 creating a half-hourly beat between Harburg and Stade, but yeah, that doesn't really happen. I swear often, especially on Saturdays it seems, it feels like the RE5 is often leaving within minutes of an S5 or vice versa. And I know, German Railways, lots of delays and schedule switches and all. It's been all over the news this year, but I know running trains half-hourly or better is possible here. At least give it to us on Saturdays. If your train makes everyone get off at Horneberg or something due to a technical problem, don't make the people wait nearly an hour for the next one, especially if we're having record heat again. I guess it's kind of depressing. Ah, god damn it, I'm out of wine. You know what else makes me really sad? You know how I mentioned that the S5 was a mix of the old S3, the S31, S21 earlier? The S5, however, was built as a new merger of the S3, S31, and S21 to one new mega route. One that would give service to the people of Buxtehude and Stade on a more clockwork basis. Well, it also inherited all of the S31's stopping points. Let's take it from the top. Hamburgs S5 is a train route that goes from Elbgaststrasse to Buxtehude or Stade, with trains departing from there every 10 to 20 minutes at peak. Except sometimes the S5 only terminates at Neugraben, or Hamburg Rathaus, which is a few stations north. And yeah, sometimes it even just goes to Berliner Tor, which isn't even on the regular S3 or S5 route anyways. But hey, gotta justify that extra stub platform there somehow, I guess. That's confusing. At least to me, compared to the rest of Hamburg. The S5 is currently being expanded, and I do think the expansion plans to a degree are pretty cool. Part of the A1, a rural rail route in the north of Hamburg, is operated by little diesel rail buses and is being double-tracked and electrified with overhead wires. In just a few years' time, the S5 will run over 100 total kilometers of track on some routings, all the way from Stade in the southwest to Kaltenkirchen in the north. By the way, Kaltenkirchen is already a really cool station, even if it's just being operated by the little rail buses. I guess it had S-Bahn at its heart, huh? And it makes sense that this new extension will use the S5 stock trains. In the north of Hamburg, trains will, like in the south, need to change from third rail power to overhead power. But if we look at maps of this extension, we'll notice that the stop at Elbgaststrasse will not lose S5 service, despite trains turning north to Kaltenkirchen one station earlier at Eidelstedt. I thought it would be supplemented by more frequent S3 trains, but no. Instead, it will serve as a brief branch on the extended S5 line, which is to say in the year 2030, the S5 will be a line that runs from Kaltenkirchen, but sometimes Elbgaststrasse, to Buxtehude or Stade, but sometimes only to Neugraben or Hamburg Rathaus, sometimes only from Elbgaststrasse to Berliner Tor, and due to construction and signaling problems, oftentimes it will only run to Hauptbahnhof or get cancelled altogether. This is a mess. It's a mess. It feels less like a straightforward German S-Bahn line, especially one in a major urban center like Hamburg, more like one of those confusing Paris RER routes. At least like the RER though, the S-Bahn trains are comfortable enough to ride, and to give props, I really do like the way that the trains on the Hamburg S-Bahn look. They look really sleek and cool. They're modern, and the red pops very nicely, and the frequencies in the city itself are good. But what even is the S5 line? It feels simultaneously half-baked and overstretched. Perhaps it'd be better if it was cut in half and rearranged a little bit, the northern bit towards Kaltenkirchen being rebranded as the S6. Except an S6 is already planned, which will go from Neugraben to Elbgaststrasse via the connecting railway. Just like the S5 already does.
I hate this!
No, Jamie, don't put up the box lights. It'll be more than sunny out. Fun fact, I'm a professional. I went to school for this. So in the end, the S5 is a vital link between Hamburg and several communities in northern Niedersachsen that is one step forward from the old S3, and yet also a few steps back, which itself was already a little bit of a mess. That bridge alone was always a problem. I appreciate the new peak frequencies, but not the route deviations. Oh, and I haven't even gone to depth into the weird history of the line about how the color is reused from an old diesel route that was called the S5, dating back to the days when certain regional trains had to be given S-Bahn numbers so local tickets would work on them. I'm so glad we have integrated ticketing and have for like decades now. And I can accept that the HVB is doing a lot right now, and that these may just be temporary growing pains. Hell, there's an S4 line in the works in the east of the city, and an S6 line I just complained about is potentially getting extended to the Lurup in the coming decades, which is a horribly underserved area of Hamburg that really deserves it. But I live in the now, and in the now, the S5 is in need of some major improvements. Much like your parents after you're caught smoking, I'm not mad, just disappointed. Things are sometimes so hectic in trying to take the S5 into Hamburg that for certain important doctor's appointments in the past, I've actually opted to instead just go to Bremerhaven, which I can connect to via Buxtehude. I hate to be so negative, especially my first video on this channel, and for a contest video nonetheless, but these are problems worth talking about. Besides, I've been told that complaining about trains is an important part of German culture, so I hope my rice pass is in the mail. But maybe we don't need to accept this. Maybe we need to voice our concerns and make ourselves heard. Maybe I need to go straight to Bahnhof Stade, admire all that very pretty artwork from the local students, head into Hamburg to the main HVB office, and give them a piece of my mind. The train got cancelled again.